Hello, I'm Rachel Ashwood, and this is a fictional narration created exclusively for entertainment. All characters, events, and circumstances belong to the realm of imagination. This story is a dark suspense romance. The 32nd floor of the Navarro Logistics building in downtown Des Moines didn't smell like danger. It smelled like expensive coffee, new carpet, and the constant hum of state-of-the-art servers. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, Iowa's capital looked like an organized model under the gray November sky. Maya Reyes wasn't there because she had made a mistake or was running from an ex-boyfriend. She was there because the Navarro Group's insurance company had required an independent security audit before renewing their billion-dollar policy. Maya was the best ethical saboteur on the market, and her job was to find the cracks in Adrian Navarro's empire before the government or rivals did. Maya sat in the main conference room, surrounded by screens displaying the company's real-time data flow. She didn't wear a hood or hide in basements. She wore a tailored gray suit and kept her consultant badge visible on her chest. The suspense here wasn't about who would open the door with a gun, but about what she would find in export records that didn't match cargo manifests. She knew Navarro Logistics was a front for much denser operations, but her function was technical. If the system was vulnerable, she would prove it. The problem began when she found a backdoor that hadn't been created by an external hacker, but by the system administrator himself. The meeting room door opened at exactly 5 p.m. There was no dramatic or threatening entrance. Adrian Navarro entered, accompanied by his lawyer and an assistant, carrying a tablet and the expression of someone who valued every second of his day. He was 40 years old, with impeccable posture, and the kind of calm that only men who own the entire city can maintain. Adrian didn't invade Maya's space. He sat at the head of the table, in his rightful place, and waited for her to begin presenting the preliminary results. There was no savior there. There was a client and a service provider who was about to say something he didn't want to hear. "Ms. Reyes," Adrian said, his voice deep and perfectly modulated, without any trace of aggression. "I hope our infrastructure has proven to be as robust as our profit reports suggest. The insurance company is anxious for your final assessment." Maya held his gaze. She didn't feel fear. She felt the intellectual challenge. She opened a chart on the main screen showing a 4% divergence in encrypted data traffic leaving the Council Bluffs cargo terminal. It was a detail any other auditor would ignore, but Maya knew that 4% of a volume that size represented millions of dollars in information, or goods, that weren't being recorded. She wasn't being protected by Adrian. She was, at that moment, holding the rope that could hang him. "The system is excellent, Mr. Navarro," Maya responded, maintaining a professional and dry tone. "But I found an inconsistency in the exit protocol of the West Terminal. Someone created a shadow tunnel to divert access logs. I could ignore this and sign your certificate, but my contract says I report directly to the insurance company's board, not to you." The silence that followed was purely strategic. Adrian's lawyer began talking about confidentiality clauses, but Adrian raised his hand, silencing her without taking his eyes off Maya. There was something in his gaze that wasn't predatory in the physical sense, but rather a recognition of competence. He wasn't trying to intimidate her with brute force. He was assessing the price of her integrity. The dark romance here didn't come from a kidnapping, but from the perception that both were equally ruthless in their fields. "I appreciate your honesty, Ms. Reyes," Adrian said, standing up and walking to the window, his back to her. "Many of your predecessors accepted generous bonuses to not see these tunnels. The fact that you're bringing this to the table in a recorded meeting means you're either very brave or very expensive." Maya closed the notebook with a firm click. She knew that by saying that, she had just transformed a routine audit into a game of corporate survival. Adrian turned to her, and for the first time, the CEO mask slipped just a millimeter, revealing the man who commanded Iowa's underworld with the same precision he managed legal logistics. He didn't offer protection. He offered a challenge that she, in her professional arrogance, couldn't refuse. The suspense wasn't about what he would do with her, but about what they would do together with the information they now both shared. The conference room had glass walls, but the sound inside was well controlled. When Adrian's lawyer returned to talking about confidentiality, Maya realized this was more to keep the record clean than to resolve anything. Adrian let her speak for a few seconds and then tilted his head toward the assistant. "Give us a moment," he said. The assistant hesitated just enough to show it wasn't the kind of order he heard without knowing the reason. Still, he left. The lawyer looked at Adrian, waiting for confirmation. He didn't look back, just repeated the gesture, calm, definitive. She stood up, grabbed the tablet, and left too, closing the door with a smoothness that seemed rehearsed. Maya stayed seated. Not out of bravery, out of calculation. If she stood up now, it looked like flight. If she continued sitting, it looked like choice. She preferred to seem like someone who chooses. Adrian didn't return to the head of the table. He walked slowly around, stopping near the screen panel as if the subject were infrastructure and not people. When he spoke, it wasn't as a CEO in a meeting. It was as someone reducing the space between company and life. "I don't like surprises, Ms. Reyes." "Then you shouldn't have built a business based on layers," she responded. It was a small provocation, but real. Maya didn't smile. She didn't want to give him an easy reading of what she felt. Adrian observed her face as if cataloging micro-decisions. "You think I built this without control?" he asked. Maya shrugged. "Just the minimum. I think someone inside your system is working against you. Or with you. Still can't tell." Adrian stopped behind her chair, without touching. The distance was small enough to be intentional, large enough not to seem threatening. Maya felt her body react anyway, not with fear, but with the physical awareness that he controlled spaces. "You're good," he said, not as a gentle compliment, as an assessment. "I charge for it." "I know." He returned to the opposite side of the table and placed a thin envelope next to her notebook. Nothing sealed. No stamp, just paper. An old object in an environment that was all screens. Maya didn't touch it. She looked. "What is this?" "What I know about you," Adrian responded. Maya felt immediate discomfort, and it wasn't surprise. It was the fact that he had turned the conversation into something personal the second he realized he couldn't buy her integrity with money. She kept her voice low. "You did a background check." "I did a background check 2 weeks ago, when the insurance company sent your name on the list," he said. "I didn't put you here, but I adapted." Maya breathed slowly. The right thing would be to take the envelope and tear it up. The right thing would also be to pretend she didn't care. She did neither. She just asked, "And what did you find?" Adrian tilted his head as if choosing an honest answer, without exaggerating. A weak point that isn't technical. She didn't like the way he said weak point, as if her life were a system. "I don't have a weak point." "You do," he said. "You just call it something else." He pushed the envelope a few inches toward her, without hurry. Maya finally took it. She opened it carefully. There were no dramatic photos or newspaper clippings. There were 2 printed pages and a third with a screenshot of an old lawsuit, an incident report, a hospital, a male name, and, near the end, a line that made her stomach tighten without asking permission. The remote access authentication configuration did not follow the recommended standard. Maya read it once, then again. She had seen that phrase before. Not exactly that one, but versions of it, in reports no one read until something went wrong. The difference was that, here, the phrase was linked to a real person. She closed the envelope carefully, as if the paper were fragile. Her voice came out more contained. "This has nothing to do with you." Adrian didn't respond immediately. His silence wasn't to intimidate. It was to let her fill the space with what she didn't want to say. "You were a consultant," he continued finally. "A configuration error, a door you didn't close properly, and then someone came in, and someone died." Maya raised her eyes, cold now. "You don't know what happened," I know enough, Adrian said. Enough to understand why you don't accept bribes. You think you already paid for one mistake once, and you don't intend to pay again. Maya held back the urge to deny with emotion. She knew that denying with emotion revealed weakness. She preferred to attack with logic. And what do you want with this? Blackmail me into signing your certificate? Adrian walked to the chair at the head, and this time sat down. The gesture seemed like a return to corporate, but it wasn't. It was as if he were saying he could be patient. I don't want you to sign anything false, he said. I want you to fix it. Maya felt the weight of the phrase. Fix meant going deeper. Fix meant touching things she might prefer not to see. I don't work for you, she responded. I'm not hiring you, Adrian said. I'm proposing an adjustment. He rested his forearms on the table, without leaning too much. You found a shadow tunnel. You're right. It's inside my system. I can have someone erase it. I can have someone disappear. That solves quickly, but creates another kind of leak. He paused briefly. You're the only person in this room who can close this the right way without calling the wrong attention. Maya realized where this was going. And yet, she waited. You're going to clean my system, Adrian continued. The way you would clean it for the insurance company. The correct way, with reports, with internal traceability. Only the final report goes to me, not them. Maya laughed, without humor. And in return? Adrian looked at her with a calm that, at that point, was beginning to irritate. Not because he was tranquil, because he seemed comfortable with the idea of having that file in hand. In return, he said, I close your past. Maya remained motionless. You can't. I can enough, he responded. Not to erase what happened, but to erase the trail that links your name to it in any future investigation. I can guarantee that no one uses that episode as a knife at your throat again. She felt the proposal enter through a place she avoided looking at. It wasn't fear of jail. It was fear of being reduced to a mistake forever. This is blackmail, Maya said. Adrian didn't deny it. It's leverage. She tightened her fingers on the envelope. And if I say no? Adrian shrugged, a small gesture, almost tired. The insurance company will receive your report. They'll cancel the policy. That calls attention. Attention calls federal audit, because logistics and big insurance always call. The federal audit finds the tunnel, finds what passes through it, and starts looking for someone to blame. He didn't change his tone. And when they look for someone to blame, they always prefer someone who seems technically responsible, someone with a history of open doors, someone like you. Maya felt anger, but also an ugly recognition. It wasn't impossible. It was plausible. And plausible was enough to become a threat in the real world. You're using my mistake to trap me in your world, she said. Adrian held her gaze. I'm offering you a way to enter and exit without being crushed by it. Maya was silent, not because she was surrendered, because she was choosing the best way not to lose. What's the deadline? She asked. Adrian answered immediately, as if he had already decided. 3 days to map. 1 week to close without leaving a new hole. You'll have full access, but you won't take anything out. Maya rested the envelope on the table and raised her chin. And if I find crimes? Adrian didn't look away. You will. The dry honesty was worse than any threat. Maya felt a strange kind of heat in her chest. Not romance, but shock. She wasn't used to someone being this direct. And what do I do? Pretend I didn't see? She asked. Adrian responded with uncomfortable simplicity. You'll decide how much it costs you to live with what you know. Maya realized that, at that moment, the darkness of the story wasn't him pointing a gun. It was him putting a moral question on the table and not softening it. She took the envelope again, but didn't put it away, just held it, as if she needed to feel that it existed. I accept with one condition, she said. Adrian waited, without interrupting. Nothing accessing my personal life while I'm here, Maya continued. No one following me. Nothing using this as a game. Adrian was silent for a second. You're asking for limits from a man who lives by crossing limits. I'm telling you how I work, Maya responded. You want my work? This is the way. Adrian nodded slowly. All right. Maya didn't relax. His all right didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like someone who accepted a term for now. She gathered the notebook and envelope. I start tomorrow, she said. Adrian stood up, opened the door, and gestured for her to exit first. It wasn't courtesy. It was flow control. Maya passed him without touching. Even so, she felt his gaze follow. In the corridor, before turning the corner, she heard his voice, low, as if speaking without an audience. Maya. She stopped, without turning. You're not the only person here living with an old mistake. She didn't respond. But the phrase stayed with her in an uncomfortable way. Maya arrived early the next day, not because she was excited, but because she needed an interval of silence before the building filled up. The Navarro logistics lobby had the kind of security that didn't make a point of looking like security. No flashy detectors, no visibly armed people. Just efficient receptionists and cameras too small to be ignored. She passed her consultant badge and went up with a coffee in hand that she didn't want, but that helped occupy her fingers. The full access that Adrian promised came in a shared folder with permissions too broad to be real. It wasn't naivety, it was control. The idea was simple. If everything passes through a place he determined, he knows what she saw, when she saw it, and what she tried to copy. Maya accepted the game the way she always accepted it, assuming that any room with an open door also had a camera. She worked for 2 straight hours, without music, without breaks, going straight to what mattered. In auditing, the trick was not to fall in love with theory. First, map. Then, confirm. The shadow tunnel was still there, disguised with the same lazy elegance as always. An internal service that shouldn't communicate with the external world that way. She already had a list of hypotheses and a list of people. Neither pleased her. It was late morning, when she opened a set of internal tickets from the IT team, that she found the first thing that didn't make sense. There was an old ticket, from weeks before, with the subject, Background check, Reyes M. Maya stared at the line as if the monitor had changed languages. Background checks weren't an IT task. Not that way. Not in that system. Still, the ticket was there, registered, with a number, a person responsible, and an attachment. She clicked on the attachment and felt a short cold run up her spine. It wasn't fear. It was irritation with a specific type of invasion, the kind that tries to seem normal. The file was a simple PDF, without a letterhead, but with content organized too well. Data she didn't put on common forms. Old addresses, names of 2 coworkers, a traffic ticket from years ago, and an item that shouldn't appear anywhere if he was telling the truth. The emergency contact. Jonas Klein. Maya closed the PDF with enough force for the mouse to hit the desk. She looked around before doing anything. No one in the room. Still, cameras existed. She breathed slowly and opened the ticket history. The person responsible appeared as E. Sato, a name she hadn't seen yet. There was a short response in the ticket itself, written as an internal note. Navarro requested discreetly, "Do not register outside the system." She read it twice. It was almost comical. Do not register outside the system. Inside a system he controlled was the kind of order that seemed ethical for those who just wanted to obey. Maya minimized the window and spent a few seconds looking at her own desktop. She knew she had asked for limits for a reason. It wasn't moralism. It was efficiency. When someone messes with your personal life, the negotiation changes in nature, and she didn't want to work with a crushed heart. She stood up, went to the break room, filled her water glass, and returned as if nothing had happened. On the way, she passed a glass wall that reflected her own image. Gray suit, hair pulled back, neutral expression. She looked in control. That was important. She needed to look in control before demanding accountability. In the corridor leading to the administrative wing, there was an assistant to Adrian, a younger man, too well dressed, with a tablet always in his arm. He saw Maya and opened an automatic smile. "Ms. Reyes, good morning. Mr. Navarro is in a meeting, but—" "I need to speak with him," she cut in, polite and firm. "Now." The assistant hesitated, and the smile lost some form. "Is it about the audit?" Maya held his gaze. "It's about the agreement." The word agreement seemed to have an effect. He nodded, and without arguing, indicated that she wait near the room next door. Maya waited standing, without checking her phone, without looking at the window, just breathing like someone who isn't about to discuss something personal with a man who thinks he owns his own city. The door opened 10 minutes later. Adrian came out accompanied by 2 executives, and a guy in a blue suit who seemed to have been trained not to react to anything. He was talking about deadlines and compliance, as if the company didn't have an entire underworld hidden under the carpet. When he saw Maya, Adrian slowed his pace, but didn't stop immediately. He just finished the sentence, gave a short nod to the men, and then turned to her with his usual calm. "Any problem?" he asked, as if he already knew that the word problem wasn't about technology. "Yes," Maya responded. "We're going inside." Adrian didn't ask where. He didn't need to. He opened the door of the small room next door and let her pass first. The room had a round table and 2 chairs. No big screens, no audience. When the door closed, Maya placed the notebook on the table, opened the ticket, and turned the screen toward him. "You said you wouldn't mess with my personal life," she said, without raising her voice. Adrian looked at the screen for a few seconds. His face didn't change. That, in itself, was already an answer. "You called that a limit," he said. "I called it a condition," Maya corrected. Adrian sat calmly, as if deciding whether this conversation deserved irritation. Maya remained standing. She wanted her own body reminding her that she still had a choice. "I didn't send anyone to follow you," Adrian said. "Didn't send anyone to touch you. No one called this guy." Maya felt anger at the way he tried to reduce the weight. "You ordered a dossier, and you put Jonas in it." Adrian held her gaze. For an instant, something changed in his face, not like regret, but like someone who accepts a tactical error. "I needed to know if you had ties," he responded. "I told you the rules." "You told me yours," he corrected, with the same calm. "I didn't promise you innocence." Maya was quiet. The phrase was true, and it was ugly. She couldn't pretend she expected kindness, but that didn't mean she would accept it. She pulled a chair and sat too, more to control her breathing than for comfort. When she spoke, it was with clarity. "You broke the agreement before I started working." Adrian tilted his head. "I broke the illusion that you were safe outside of work." Maya narrowed her eyes. "Is that a threat?" Adrian responded without hurry, choosing words that wouldn't sound like a threat, but would function as one. "It's a fact. What you're touching here isn't just mine. You think I'm the only one who runs this kind of thing? There are people who buy information and people who sell it. If I don't know who your weak point is, I can't measure the size of the risk." Maya leaned back in the chair. She wanted to say, "It's not like that," wanted to say, "Respect me." But respect wasn't currency in that place. Control was. "So you're going to use me as a calculated risk," she said. "I'm going to keep you alive," Adrian responded, and the phrase came out too simply. Without romanticization, without pretty promises, just a priority choice. Maya didn't want to be kept alive by him. The idea sounded like property. At the same time, The part of her that understood systems recognized what he was saying. He was assuming cost. And cost was the only form of care that men like him admitted. She pushed the notebook a little closer to him. "I'm going to continue the work," she said. "But Jonas gets out of your reach. Now." Adrian didn't respond immediately. He looked at the name in the PDF, then at her, as if trying to decide if this was stubbornness or courage. "I won't touch him," he said finally. "But don't ask me to pretend he doesn't exist." "Then do what you said you wouldn't do. Don't touch." Adrian let out air through his nose, almost a short laugh, but without humor. "You like to give orders." Maya stared. "I like not being cornered." There was a silence that wasn't comfortable. It was productive, in the worst sense. Both recalculating limits. Maya realized something she didn't want to realize. Adrian was irritated, yes, but not because she challenged. He seemed irritated because she was right, and he didn't like being caught lying in small detail. Adrian stood up and went to the door, opening it. "You have 24 hours to give me a complete map of the tunnel," he said, already in decision mode. "After that, I'll decide who had access to it." Maya also stood up. "And I'll decide what I deliver to the insurance company," she responded. He stopped with his hand on the door and looked at her for a full second, without a mask. "Don't do this to me, Maya." The phrase didn't seem like a threat. It seemed like something else, more raw, request mixed with order. She didn't respond. She passed him and left. In the corridor, the assistant avoided looking directly at her. Maya returned to her desk with an uncomfortable feeling that she had just traded a technical problem for a personal problem, and that, even so, the work needed to be done. She sat down, opened the system again, and began mapping the tunnel more precisely. But now there was another variable in the middle. She didn't trust that Adrian would keep his hands off what he had already touched once. And even worse, she realized that a part of her was paying too much attention to the way he said, "Don't do this to me," as if that had really hurt him. Maya waited until late afternoon to do what she had in mind. It wasn't because she needed time. It was because she needed noise. At the beginning of the day, any strange movement screams. Near the time when people start thinking about leaving, everyone does things halfway, opens the wrong window, sends emails without reviewing, leaves sessions logged in. It was the best time to plant something and see who bites. She didn't want to catch Adrian for sport. She wanted to know if the agreement had just become a nice phrase to get through the conversation. If he had already crossed the line once, crossing again wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. And she didn't work well with patterns she couldn't predict. On the audit panel, Maya created an internal task with a deliberately eye-catching but plausible name. Preliminary Report, Traffic Divergence, and West Terminal. She didn't put anything compromising in there. Just 2 technical paragraphs, the same ones she had already said in the meeting, and a neutral observation. Consistent divergence suggests bypass tunnel. Need to map origin, credentials. Then she attached an empty file, a PDF with blank pages, and a random title. The attachment was the bait. The system recorded who downloaded it and from where. She saved the task in a shared folder to which only 3 groups had access: hers, legal, and infrastructure IT. In theory, Adrian wasn't part of any group. In theory, he was above the detail. But men like him didn't live on theory. Maya waited 5 minutes and opened the file access log. Nothing. She waited another 10. Nothing. She took a sip of water and returned to the real mapping of the tunnel. She did what she had promised, began drawing a dependency map, looking at credentials, times, and intermediate machines. With each confirmation, she noted in the notebook, and only then replicated in the report. Not out of paranoia, but out of method. If someone suddenly cut her access, she wouldn't lose her line of reasoning. Almost an hour later, when most of the floor was already quieter, the attachment log changed. A new access appeared. The download had been made from a machine that shouldn't access that folder. exec32f admin. Maya didn't need to check the username to know whose it was. The machine was from the executive floor. The kind of machine that doesn't exist for the rest of the company, but appears when someone wants to see everything without asking. She felt her jaw lock for a moment. It wasn't surprise. It was confirmation. And confirmation for her was always more useful than indignation. She opened the log details and saw the exact time, session, and internal address. There was no way to explain that as an accident. It wasn't someone from legal who was curious. It was executive access. Direct. Maya closed the log and spent a few seconds looking at the screen, deciding the next step. The most impulsive part of her wanted to get up and go to Adrian's office, throw the screenshot on the table, and end this story before it became something else. The part that had learned to survive in masculine and vain environments knew that direct confrontation, too early, only changed the type of lie, not the behavior. She chose the third option. Act as if she hadn't seen, but reorganize the game. Maya duplicated the bait file, and this time inserted something small and false inside it. A reference to an internal name as a possible person responsible for the tunnel. An invented name, but with the look of a real name, the kind that passes through a team without raising suspicion. Possible involvement, E. Sato, Infra. She didn't put this because she thought E. Sato was guilty. She put it because she wanted to see what Adrian would do with the information when he thought he had received something extra. If he was the type of man who used anything as a knife, someone would pay for it quickly. If he was smarter, he would wait. And if he was someone truly trying to respect some limit, he would talk to her first. Maya saved the file and left it there for 20 minutes. Enough for him to see. Enough for him to react. It wasn't a trap to destroy. It was a test to measure temperature. When the log showed new access from the same executive machine, Maya didn't feel satisfaction. She felt a cold tiredness, because now there was no way to treat this as maybe. Adrian was monitoring her work. And, as much as this was expected, it was also the exact breaking of what he had agreed not to do. She was about to close the notebook when the desk phone rang. Maya looked at the phone for a second, as if the object were evidence. She answered. "Speak," she said, not bothering to sound friendly. The voice on the other side was Adrian's, low, with no one listening on his side. The tone was controlled, but there was a short thread of irritation that Maya hadn't heard before. "You put a name there." "I did," Maya responded. "You don't know who it is." "I know he exists in the system," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "And I know someone accessed my folder without being in it." There was silence. Not the silence of, "I didn't understand." The silence of someone who was caught doing something he considers normal. "You're testing me," Adrian said. "I'm working," Maya responded. "The way I work." His breathing on the other side changed. Just a little. "Take the name out," he said. Not as a request, as an instruction. Maya felt anger rise but held it. "You downloaded my file after saying you wouldn't touch." "I said I wouldn't mess with your personal life," Adrian responded. "What you do here is my problem." Maya rested the pen on the notebook and made a line without realizing. A small gesture of containment. "You're not going to use this my problem to make someone bleed because of a guess I made to see if you're watching me," she said. "That's not how I operate." On the other side, his voice became harder. "You think I need your invented name to make someone bleed?" Maya was quiet for half a second. Not because she was afraid, because the honest answer was no. "Then why did you call?" she asked. The next pause was longer. Not theatrical, just human, as if he were choosing how much to reveal without seeming weak. "Because that guy exists," Adrian said finally. "And he's not who you think." Maya felt her stomach tighten, not from shock, but from a deeper irritation. She had touched something real without meaning to. Then call me to the room and talk, she responded. Don't grab from behind. The phrase came out harsher than she planned. She regretted it in the same instant, not out of politeness, but because she had given emotional ammunition. Adrian didn't react with a shout. He just responded low. 10 minutes. Room 32B. Without your notebook. Maya almost laughed. Now you dictate how I go? Now I prevent you from recording something that can kill you, he said, and hung up. Maya held the phone in her hand, hearing the silence of the floor. She looked at the access log one more time, as if she needed to remember the reason to be irritated. Then she closed the notebook, put the notebook in her bag, and stood up. She didn't take the backup phone. She didn't take anything but the necessary. On the way to room 32B, she thought about what had just happened, and what it meant for the love she hadn't even allowed to exist as a possibility yet. What she felt for Adrian wasn't trust yet. It wasn't affection yet. But it also wasn't just contempt. It was something more uncomfortable. The feeling that, when he got irritated, it wasn't because she disrupted his work. It was because she managed to mess with the control he had over things, and he didn't know what to do with that without becoming the type of man he said he wasn't. Room 32B was smaller than the others and had no windows. It wasn't dark. It was practical. A table, 4 chairs, a whiteboard, and a turned-off projector. The kind of room used for meetings that don't go on the agenda. Adrian was already there when Maya entered. There was no guard at the door, no assistant, no theatrics, just him, a glass of water, and a manila envelope on the table, as if paper was still the safest way to carry certain things. Maya stopped a step from the chair and didn't sit. The habit of standing was a way not to settle into a bad conversation. You asked for no notebook, she said. I came. Now talk. Adrian didn't respond like someone irritated by demands. He seemed for a moment tired of his own game. He pointed to the chair, not as an order, but as a suggestion. Maya sat, slowly, still with her body on alert. I downloaded your file, Adrian began, without apologizing. And you put a name that shouldn't be in your report. Maya kept her voice neutral. I put a name to see if you'd react. You reacted. I reacted because you touched something that's not just technical, he said. He pulled the manila envelope closer, and instead of handing it over, opened it, and took out a sheet with a small photograph, printed on plain paper. It wasn't a glamour photo, nor a social media photo. It was a security camera photo. Corridor, high angle, a person in profile. The face showed little, but enough. Maya looked and felt her stomach do a short turn. This is Sato? She asked. Yes, Adrian responded. Ethan Sato. She frowned. On the ticket it shows E. Sato. I thought it was anyone, an admin. That's what I wanted you to think, Adrian said, and the phrase came out direct, as if he had decided to stop pretending he was clean. He works here with that name. But that's not his name. Maya kept looking at the image. The photo seemed recent. The shirt was an employee's, badge, everything correct. That was the worst. It was easy. Why would you keep someone like that in your building? She asked. Adrian didn't look away. The honesty, again, came without embellishment. Because I don't keep. I tolerate for now, and because I didn't discover yesterday. Maya felt discomfort rise slowly. This was confirmation that he knew more than he had said and had chosen to let it run. You knew about the tunnel before me. I knew an exit existed, Adrian said. Didn't know exactly where. I don't go into technical layers. I go into people. Maya didn't like the distinction. It seemed like an excuse. Still, she understood. His world punished people. Hers, systems. Both were capable of ugly things through different paths. Adrian placed another sheet on the table. This time, it was a copy of an old police report, with part of the data covered. In the corner, a county from another state. a date from years ago, and a name that Maya didn't recognize immediately because it was blurred, but the last name appeared on a preserved line. Sato. He was involved in a case of criminal arson, Adrian said. He wasn't convicted. He disappeared, changed states, changed names, and someone recently decided it would be useful for him to reappear here, with access. Maya looked at Adrian. Someone who? Adrian didn't respond with the name, and that was also an answer. You think this comes from inside your world? Maya said, piecing it together. I don't think, he responded. I know. Maya rested her fingers on the table. The room had no window, but seemed even more closed. Then why didn't you remove him? She asked, quieter. If he's infiltration, you cut. Adrian was silent for a moment. When he spoke, it was without the CEO tone and without the threat tone. It was almost as if he were explaining a mechanism. If I remove him early, I warn whoever planted him. If I leave him, I can see where the plant drinks water. I need the trail. I need to know which routes they use, which banks, which names outside here. Maya felt anger and respect at the same time. The kind of feeling that didn't seem healthy, but was real. She was irritated not just with the risk, but with the calm with which he decided the risk of others. And me? Maya asked. What am I in this strategy? Adrian held her gaze. You're the part I didn't have. The part that closes doors without tearing down the house. Maya breathed deeply. Part of her wanted to refuse just to not be used. Another part, the one that lived to solve things, realized that the way it was, someone was going to fall, and if she didn't enter, the hole would continue open. What do you want from me exactly? She asked. Adrian pushed a third sheet. This time a simple network map, hand-drawn, with arrows and boxes. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. He had tried to understand what she did, in his way. That by itself was a type of approach. I want you to do two things, he said. One you would already do, and one you won't like. Maya didn't respond. She waited. The first, you're going to map the entire tunnel and give me the real path, without this bait PDF, without games, the path that leaves proof. And the second? Adrian picked up the glass of water, took a sip, and put it back, as if using the gesture to organize his own head. You're going to create a false exit, he said. One that looks like a big leak, but isn't. We let Sato use it. We follow. And when he hands the key to whoever planted him, I close the circuit. Maya was silent for a few seconds, staring at the drawing. This is a trap. It is, Adrian confirmed. And someone's going to pay. Adrian didn't argue about that. He just nodded with a slight movement of his head, as if it were inevitable in his world. Maya felt her throat tighten, and it wasn't fear. It was moral weight. In her work, she found flaws and made recommendations. Here, she found flaws and helped capture people. I don't do justice, she said. Neither do I, Adrian responded. I do consequences. The phrase, for the first time, left Maya without a ready answer. It wasn't an effect phrase. It was an ugly definition, and it seemed too true. She looked again at the photo of the man in the corridor. If I do this, I want guarantees, she said. Adrian waited. Not about me, Maya continued carefully. About what you're going to do when you close the circuit. You're not going to turn this into a general cleaning. Adrian rested his hand on the table, fingers spread, like someone holding their own impatience. You're asking me to be predictable. I'm asking you not to do things I can't see, Maya responded. If I enter this, I enter knowing. No surprises. Adrian was quiet, and for a second, Maya thought he would deny. Instead, he said something that didn't sound like a romantic concession, but like an adjustment. I'll give you a territory, he said. A piece you control. Maya narrowed her eyes. What do you mean? Adrian pulled a thin folder and opened it to another sheet. an organizational chart and a set of internal codes. He pointed to a specific unit, the Secondary Council Bluffs terminal, the one she had already mentioned in the meeting. A place small enough not to be the heart, large enough to be real. This terminal has two functions, Adrian said. One legal, and one on the margin. I cut the margin there. I close that route. I lose money, and I buy silence with it. Maya felt the impact. It wasn't a promise to change. It was a strategic choice with cost. Real cost was the only currency she accepted as proof. Why? She asked, and the question came out before she thought about keeping emotional distance. Adrian looked at her with an expression that wasn't sweet, but was bare enough to be uncomfortable. Because I'm not going to ask you to dirty your hands for me without dirtying mine too. Maya didn't know how to respond. What she felt wasn't relief. It was danger of another kind. Starting to believe in someone who lives by manipulating. She collected the sheets slowly, not to take, but to look one more time. If you close that territory, I'll make the trap, she said. But I'm going to document enough to protect myself if it goes wrong. Adrian nodded. Document. Just don't deliver. Maya stood up. Adrian stood up too. Neither approached beyond what was necessary, but the room seemed smaller than before. And about Jonas, Maya said, already at the door, without turning completely. I know you know the name. That doesn't give you rights. Adrian responded without hesitating, as if he had already decided his own limit there. It doesn't. She left without looking back, carrying a new weight. It wasn't just the work anymore. It was the perception that Adrian had just offered something that men like him rarely offer without calculating too much. And yet, he had calculated. The cafe was on the ground floor, on the other side of the lobby, with small tables and metal chairs that creaked when someone sat down. It wasn't a beautiful place, nor did it pretend to be. It was the type of space that existed for employees to pass through quickly, holding paper cups and conversations that didn't matter. The ambient sound was low, more machine than people. Maya chose a table near the wall, where she could see the entrance without seeming like she was watching. She wasn't waiting for Adrian. She was trying to think clearly after room 32B, organizing the work into simple steps. Map the tunnel, build the false exit, document enough not to be swallowed if the plan went wrong. Only, when she tried to mentally write the plan, his phrase came back, I'll give you a territory, and disrupted her reasoning the way non-technical things disrupt. She took her phone out of her pocket and opened the notes screen. She wrote 3 items and deleted them. Wrote again. The problem wasn't the plan. It was the feeling that she had just accepted an agreement where the cost seemed real, and that touched a part of her that preferred not to be touched. Her coffee cup was already almost cold when Adrian entered the space without calling attention. He didn't come escorted, didn't stop to talk to anyone, and didn't look around like someone looking for threats. He just entered like someone who has too many places to be and chooses still to stop for 2 minutes. He didn't sit immediately. He stopped beside the table, in the same controlled way he used in meetings. But there, without glass and without screens, it seemed less power and more habit. Do you usually work late? He asked. Maya raised her eyes. I usually finish what I start. Adrian nodded as if accepting the answer as sufficient. He sat in the chair across from her. He didn't ask permission. He also didn't touch anything of hers. It was an approach of a few inches, but with weight. How long are you going to be angry at me about the dossier? He asked. Maya didn't respond quickly. She didn't want to give him the pleasure of an emotional response, but she also didn't want to pretend it didn't affect her. You want a number? She returned. I want to know if you're going to keep thinking about it when you're working on the tunnel, he said. Because if you make a mistake, it's not my money that disappears first. Maya pressed the cup lid with her thumb, a small, repetitive gesture. I don't make mistakes when I'm angry, she said. I make mistakes when I start to trust. Adrian was quiet for a moment, staring at the edge of the table instead of her face. When he looked back, his voice was no longer meeting. It was lower. Then don't trust. Maya let out a short breath through her nose. It wasn't laughter. It was irritated relief. As if he had said something obvious, but that she needed to hear so she wouldn't invent a romance where there was nothing yet. "Are you really going to cut council bluffs?" she asked. Adrian didn't respond like someone making promises. He responded like someone who had already made a decision and was just informing. "Yes." "Today?" "Tomorrow morning," he said. "That's when I can make it look like a business decision. Supplier change, route adjustment, optimization. There'll be complaints, there'll be cost, and there'll be people irritated with me." Maya observed his face looking for signs of satisfaction. She didn't find any. What she saw was a type of contained tiredness, as if he were already calculating the consequences and accepting all of them. "Why are you telling me the time?" she asked. Adrian rested his forearm on the table, without invading her space. "Because you'll know if I kept my word," he said, "and because I don't like giving you just words." Maya was silent. The phrase wasn't romantic. It also wasn't kind. Still, it was a rare gesture. He was trying to offer proof in the way he knew how. She looked away to the cafeteria. 2 female employees were laughing quietly near the cappuccino machine. A man in a tie was talking on the phone as if everything were urgent. Normal life moved around, and that made the conversation stranger. They seemed like a crack within everyday life. "I didn't want to be here," Maya said, suddenly, more to herself than to him. "I wanted to do my job, get my money, leave, and sleep without thinking about anything else." Adrian didn't respond with sarcasm. He just observed. "And you think I wanted to be here?" he asked. Maya looked back at him, without softness. "You chose this." Adrian nodded, accepting the accusation. "I chose," he said. "And there are days I don't know anymore when this choice became habit. What I know is that you entering this changes the way I have to choose from here on." Maya felt something tighten in her chest, and it wasn't beautiful emotion. It was the discomfort of realizing he was admitting influence. Influence was dangerous. For her, because it trapped her. For him, because it weakened him. "I don't want to be your excuse," she said. Adrian stared at her for a second longer. "I don't use excuses," he responded. "I use reasons." Maya held the impulse to respond with irony. Instead, she asked something simpler, more human, and therefore more risky. "Do you sleep?" Adrian seemed caught mid-stride. Not offended, just surprised by a question that had no immediate utility. "Little," he responded. "When I sleep, I wake up thinking about lists." "Lists of what?" "What I have to prevent," he said, without a ready phrase. "And what I have to do before someone does it for me." Maya didn't know what to say. She didn't want to have empathy for him. But empathy wasn't a decision. It was a reflex. She looked at his hands, a broken nail on his thumb, a small detail that didn't match the rest. Laborious. Human. "I'm going to build the false exit tomorrow," Maya said, returning to what was safe. "Work. I'm going to need access to 2 servers that aren't in the folder you gave me." Adrian took his phone and typed without arguing. "I'll release them." Maya observed the gesture and noticed something else. He did things without asking someone else to do them. This indicated the level of control. And it also indicated that with him, nothing was just a request. When he finished, he didn't put the phone away immediately. He held it in his hand, looking at Maya as if he were about to say something else and deciding if it was worth the risk. "About Jonas," Adrian began. Maya hardened her gaze. "No," Adrian nodded, as if truly accepting the limit this time. "All right," he said. Then I'm just going to tell you one thing. If someone comes near him because of me, I'll know. Maya frowned. Are you reassuring me or warning me? Adrian didn't smile. Both can be the same thing. Maya was silent for a few seconds. She hated that this was true in that world. Adrian stood up. He didn't pause to create atmosphere. He just stood up like someone who needed to go. Tomorrow morning I'll cut Council Bluffs, he said, and the phrase sounded like a commitment without romanticization. After that, you do your part, and we finish this. Maya also stood up. The two stood, facing each other, close enough for the air between them to get warm, but without touching. There was no kiss. There was no promise. There was a tension that didn't need to be named to exist. Adrian, Maya said, calling him by name for the first time without Mr. Navarro. It was small, but intentional. He stopped. If you try to control me the way you control the rest, this won't become partnership. It'll become war. Adrian looked at her for a moment. His answer came dry, honest, and therefore more dangerous than any pretty phrase. I know, and he left. Maya stood there for a few seconds, with cold coffee, and the feeling that, for the first time, the main threat wasn't the tunnel or Sato. It was the fact that she was beginning to understand Adrian as a person, and people were always the part that brought down plans. The next morning, Maya arrived before the time the building seemed to wake up. The lobby still had that smell of recent cleaning and coffee being prepared, and the people passing through walked more slowly, as if the day hadn't yet decided what to ask of them. She went straight up, without stopping to talk to anyone, with the feeling that it wasn't anxiety. It was uncomfortable curiosity. She wanted to see if Adrian bluffed like most men who talked about cost. And, at the same time, part of her wanted him not to bluff, because that would make everything more dangerous. On the computer, the accesses she had requested the night before were released. There was no message, no warning, just the open door. Maya noted this as a point. He kept his word quickly when he wanted to. She opened the monitoring console and pulled up the traffic reports from the secondary terminal in Council Bluffs. The pattern was there, still present. A redundant flow, well packaged, with encryption that didn't match what the company declared to the insurance company. It was the kind of thing that, in a normal audit, became an inconsistency and improvement recommendation. There, it was an exposed vein. At 8:07, the graph changed. Not gradually. It changed as if someone had cut a hose. The traffic associated with the route she had marked disappeared, replaced by a clean detour to an alternative, legal, traceable infrastructure that seemed to have been prepared to receive the impact. The system recorded changes in chain, revoked permissions, rotated certificates, reissued keys, firewall rules adjusted with almost clinical care. It wasn't improvisation. It was a decision prepared to look like optimization, exactly as he had said. Maya kept looking at the screen for a few seconds without touching the mouse. In theory, it was just a set of logs. In practice, she had just watched someone lose real money without complaining. And that touched her in a way that wasn't romantic and wasn't comfortable. It touched the concept of proof. She trusted proof more than she trusted anything. She opened the Operational Incidents tab and saw the first effects. An automatic ticket appearing. Cargo delay. Alternative route. Additional cost. Another. Contract breach. Local supplier. And then an internal email that shouldn't have reached her account, but did because the system had been opened too much. A short chain of messages between two executives discussing margin loss and partner irritation. None of them said crime. They said margin and partner, like people who talk about ugly things using clean words. Maya felt her mouth dry, not from fear, from clarity. Adrian wasn't trying to be better. He was making a surgical cut because it sustained a larger plan, and because somehow he had included her limit in that calculation. She moved to the second test. track if the cut route had been replaced by another shadow. That's what she expected. Men like Adrian don't give up a corridor without opening another one somewhere. Only for a few minutes she found nothing equivalent. The illegal traffic hadn't migrated. It had disappeared. This was rare. And rarity, for Maya, was a sign of two things. Either he was really paying the price, or he was hiding better than before. She kept digging. She checked subnetworks, looked for spikes in old schedules, cross-referenced with expected loads. Nothing. If compensation existed, it was outside the layer she accessed, or it hadn't been activated yet. Which meant that, at that instant, Council Bluffs really had been a ceded territory. Maya leaned back in her chair and let out air slowly. She didn't feel gratitude. Gratitude seemed too dangerous to feel near a man like Adrian. What she felt was a kind of irritated respect, something that didn't ask permission. The phone rang. This time she didn't delay answering. Yes. You saw, Adrian said from the other side. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Maya didn't respond immediately. She didn't want to give him the comfort of hearing yes with any emotion. I saw, she said finally. There was a short silence, and she realized a strange thing. He seemed to be waiting for that I saw, like someone waits for confirmation of a commitment. Not as a boss. As a man who invested and wants to know if he was noticed. Then do your part, Adrian said. I will, Maya responded. But I need you to understand something. Speak. Maya looked at the tunnel map she had drawn in her notebook and chose words that weren't accusation, just truth. You buying my cooperation with cost works, but it doesn't buy my silence if I think you're using this to make the rest worse. Adrian was silent for a second longer. I'm not making the rest worse, he said. I'm keeping the rest alive. Maya closed her eyes for an instant. Not because of the phrase itself, but because of its weight. Keeping alive sounded like justification that always allows anything. The false exit, Maya continued. I'll build it today. By end of day, you'll have the return path and the point where Sato will bite. Good. Maya hesitated before saying the last part, because it wasn't technical. It was the human part she didn't like to deliver. You kept your word, Adrian, she said. I don't forget that. On the other side, the silence came differently, less rigid. You don't need to thank me, he responded. I'm not thanking you, Maya said, dry. I'm recording. Adrian let out air through his nose, almost a short laugh, but without humor. Still, it was the closest to lightness she had heard in him. Record then, he said, and finish. He hung up. Maya spent a few seconds staring at the graphs. She knew that cut would generate a reaction, and she also knew that the way she had reacted, the care in recording, the phrase, I don't forget that, had placed a small brick in a place where there should be nothing but contract. She stood up, took the notebook, and went to an empty room in the corridor, one of those almost nobody uses. There, alone, she began building the false exit the way she did everything when life became a variable, step by step, without haste, with margin to retreat if needed. Only now, underneath the logic, there was another layer functioning. The uncomfortable idea that Adrian had done something for her without calling it care, and that, for men like him, this was the maximum amount of care that existed. Maya had just finished the first version of the false exit when she realized something was already moving. She didn't receive a warning, didn't see an email, didn't hear footsteps in the corridor. It was a minimal alteration in the traffic pattern, a touch too light to be casual, like someone testing a doorknob before opening the door. The access came from the same set of credentials she had already marked as anomalous, only now with a new detail. The session was opened with deliberate delay, as if the user were trying to seem human. Maya watched the packets enter the pipeline she had built and felt tension rise. It wasn't fear. It was responsibility. If she warned Adrian too early, she'd lose the trail. If she waited too long, she might allow someone to push the trap to a place she didn't control. She chose a middle ground, the type of choice that saves careers and destroys sleep. Maya let the session continue for 40 seconds and captured as much metadata as possible: origin, internal route, token, and what really mattered. The exfiltration point that Sato intended to use when he thought he had found a breach. When she saw the handshake with an external server that wasn't on the old map, Maya understood that having Council Bluff's cut had forced the traitor's hand. He was improvising. Then it was no longer just a test. It was time to intervene. Maya picked up the phone. She didn't want text. Text becomes proof, becomes leak, becomes a weapon for third parties. "Adrian," she said as soon as he answered. "He bit. Now." On the other side, no questions. "Where?" he responded. Maya spoke quickly, without dramatizing. "False tunnel. Credential SVC update 01. Exfiltration trying to use a new host. I have the route. If you act now, you close on top of the deliverer. If you wait, he takes the key outside." Adrian breathed once, short. "How do I hold him?" "I can slow down without crashing," Maya said. "But I can't keep him trapped." "For how long?" Maya looked at the clock and the graph at the same time. 3 minutes, maybe 4, without him suspecting. "Do it," Adrian said, and hung up. Maya returned to the screen and began acting with surgical care. She didn't block, didn't crash the system, didn't do anything that looked like security woke up. She just increased latency, created noise, and forced the traffic to repeat steps, as if it were network instability. The type of instability an experienced intruder hates, but tolerates for a few moments when he believes he's close to the prize. Meanwhile, underneath, she activated a second log that recorded everything. Each attempt, each packet, each query. If the plan went wrong, she'd have proof. Proof was what kept her standing. The clock hand seemed louder than it should be. When the 3rd minute began, the traffic changed. There was a pause in the flow, as if the intruder had realized something. Maya felt a cold in her stomach and pressed her fingers on the mouse. And then suddenly, the session died. Not by blocking. By total cut. Someone had turned off the faucet at the root. Maya stared at the screen for 2 seconds, irritated by the loss of control, and at the same time, relieved not to have let it escape. She knew what that meant. Adrian had entered with force on the board. Not physical force, structural force. When Adrian pressed a button, he didn't just press a button. The phone rang again almost immediately. "It's over," Adrian said, without introduction. "You cut early," Maya responded. "I could have gotten more." "I got what I needed," he said. Maya felt anger begin to rise, hot and automatic. "You don't know what you needed. You didn't see the new route, the improvisation. I saw." He cut in, and his voice dropped in volume instead of rising. "Because I'm here with him." Maya stopped. "With who?" "With Sato," Adrian responded. "He tried to leave through the maintenance corridor, and he won't leave again." Maya closed her eyes for a moment. That was exactly the type of phrase she didn't want to hear, because it opened a door she didn't know how to close. What Adrian would do after. "Adrian," Maya said carefully, "I gave you that territory so you'd pay cost, not so you'd pay blood." His pause on the other side was short, heavy. "You think I don't know the difference?" "I don't know what you call difference," Maya responded. The silence grew. When Adrian spoke, he didn't try to seem innocent. "I'm not going to kill him," he said. "Not today. I need the whole path. I need names." Maya realized that the phrase "not today" should scare more. And it did. But it also brought something strange. It was the first time he gave a specific guarantee, without her having to extract it. "Where are you?" Maya asked, and hated herself for asking. Asking was approaching. "Basement, internal dock," he responded. "You don't come." "I didn't ask to go," Maya lied. Adrian let out air, almost impatient. "Maya, I cut Council Bluffs. I kept my word. I'm not asking you to become me." She swallowed hard. "Then don't try to turn me into an accomplice of what I don't choose." The response came quickly, and underneath the hardness there was something more personal than he would admit. "I'm not trying to transform you. I'm trying not to lose you." Maya stood motionless with the phone to her ear, feeling the phrase hit places she didn't want to have. "This isn't about you losing me," she said, forcing her own voice to stay stable. "It's about me not losing myself." Adrian was silent for a second. When he spoke, it was almost simple. "I understand," and hung up. Maya kept looking at the logs, trying to return to what made sense. Proof, record, method. But her hands took time to obey. The phrase, "I'm trying not to lose you," didn't have the effect of a romantic declaration. It had the effect of a miscalculation, because she felt, in a dry and ugly way, that she also didn't want to lose something that hadn't even been allowed to exist yet. The Council Bluffs cut began showing the real price before the end of the day. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't police at the door. It wasn't a shootout. It was worse for someone like Adrian. It was friction. Maya saw in the systems a sequence of cancellations and redirections that shouldn't happen so quickly. A partner transportation company terminated a temporary storage contract. A bank requested clarifications about a line of credit tied to route predictability. An email from legal mentioned, in delicate terms, the word exposure. And then came the call from the insurance company, not to Maya, to Adrian. She knew because she saw the meeting invitation appear on the internal calendar by mistake. One of those slips that happen when the entire company is moving to patch something big. The meeting had a simple title: Risk Review, Operational Change. The time was 4:30 p.m. Maya shouldn't be in that meeting. Even so, at 4:27 p.m., the assistant who used to smile too much appeared at the door of her space and said, without a smile, "Ms. Reyes, Mr. Navarro requested that you participate as an observer." Observer, another clean word for dirty thing. Maya followed, not because she wanted to be near Adrian, but because she needed to see what the cut really meant. When she entered the room, there were 3 people on video: a bank executive, a woman from the insurance company with the expression of someone who had seen a lot of lies, and an older man who seemed to be from the board. Adrian was sitting sideways, without a suit, his shirt with the sleeve rolled up again, as if he had removed the formal armor on purpose. When he saw Maya, he didn't make a gesture, but his gaze stayed on her a second longer than it should in a meeting. "Let's be direct," said the woman from the insurance company. "Your change in Council Bluffs changes the risk profile and revenue predictability. We need to understand why." Adrian responded in the same business tone as always. "Optimization. I cut a supplier who was delivering less than promised." The man from the bank narrowed his eyes. "In a week when you're negotiating limit expansion?" Adrian didn't blink. "I don't expand limits based on complacency." Maya realized what was happening. Adrian was burning reputational capital, and each phrase was a bet. He could have reverted the cut to please. He didn't revert. He was paying the price in public. The insurance company returned. "This impacts the audit." Adrian tilted his head, almost imperceptible. "I know. That's why I brought Ms. Reyes. She'll confirm that the adjustment increases system integrity." Maya felt her body react. It was exactly the type of thing she didn't want, to be used as a moral seal, but it was also a chance to place limits there, in front of everyone, where manipulation cost more. She spoke calmly, without saving anyone. "From a technical point of view, the change removes a risk vector. I'm not validating commercial strategy. I'm validating attack surface reduction. The insurance woman seemed satisfied with the precision. The bank, not. But that's what Maya could offer, without losing herself. When the meeting ended, the room emptied quickly. Only Adrian and Maya remained. He didn't say, "Thank you." He never did. Instead, he leaned against the table and looked at her as if, for a few seconds, he could leave the world out there outside. "You stayed," he said. "I fulfilled my role," Maya responded. Adrian nodded, "And I fulfilled mine." Maya felt the urge to say she didn't know if he had, not completely. But the image of the graphs in the morning and the meeting now were proof of the cost. Enough proof to create a dangerous thing, the idea that he was capable of moving because of her. "What are you going to do with Sato?" she asked, directly. Adrian didn't respond immediately. He walked to the window, looking at the city as if searching for something that wasn't there. When he spoke, it was dry. "I'm going to deliver what I need to deliver." Maya closed her eyes for a moment, frustrated. "What is that? To whom?" Adrian turned his face to her, and for the first time his mask seemed less useful than tiredness. "To an ally," he said. "And I'm going to cut a route I shouldn't cut to keep that ally out of our way." Maya understood. The ceded territory was just the beginning. The ending was forming. He would cede one more piece, sacrifice a part of the empire to prevent his world from swallowing her whole. Maya took a step closer, without realizing. It wasn't romance. It was humanity going against instinct. "You don't do this for anyone," she said, as fact. Adrian looked at her, and the answer came low, almost without defense. "I shouldn't." The silence stood between them like a stretched line. Maya realized it wasn't love yet. It was worse. It was choice. Choice that, if it continued, would change both. She didn't touch him, didn't ask him to change. Just said the only thing she could say without lying. "Then don't do it for anyone. Do it because you chose." Adrian nodded once, like someone accepting a term. "I chose." 2 days later, with the evidence Maya collected, the complete tunnel map, and the exfiltration trail aligned, Adrian fulfilled the last part of what he had suggested in room 32B. He ceded more than council bluffs. He cut a second margin corridor that sustained an old partner. Not an enemy, not a rival, but someone he owed favors to. It was a decision that, within his world, was equivalent to exposing himself, and he did it anyway. Maya didn't see blood, didn't hear gunshots. The ending wasn't clean. It was operational, adjusted contracts, closed routes, replaced people, a name removed from access, and a presence in the company that disappeared without ceremony. The traitor didn't fall like a movie villain. He fell like someone who thought he controlled the system, and discovered he only controlled a corridor. When the case ended, the insurance company renewed the policy with reservations. The bank maintained the limit with conditions. Adrian's empire lost money and gained stability. And Maya, who could have left there as a consultant and pretend nothing happened, realized she could no longer pretend this had been just work. On the last night, Adrian found her in the building's parking lot, near her car. The Iowa wind was cold, and the downtown lights made the city seem cleaner than it was. "You're leaving tomorrow," he said. It wasn't a question. He had already seen the ticket, the checkout, the routines. Maya didn't get irritated this time. She was too tired to pretend control didn't exist. "I am," she responded. Adrian was silent for a moment, looking at his own shoe, as if searching the ground were easier than facing what was coming. "I fulfilled the territory," he said. "Fulfilled the cost." Maya nodded. "You did." "And you didn't deliver," he completed. "I didn't deliver," Maya said. "I chose." Adrian raised his gaze, And the way he said the next phrase had nothing heroic. It was just raw truth, the way he could manage. Then here's my final part. I'm not going to pull you inside. Maya felt her throat tighten. You already pulled. I pulled you close, Adrian corrected, but I'm not going to trap you. Maya was quiet. The difference was enormous, and he knew it. I'm not an easy man, he said, and the phrase almost sounded like a warning, not like charm. I'm not a comfortable woman, she returned. For a second, something passed on his face, close to a smile, but it didn't arrive. He approached a little, not enough to touch, just enough for her to feel the warmth of his body in the cold. I'm going to leave a door open, Adrian said. Not in my system, in my life. You enter if you want, you leave when you want. Maya looked at him for a long time. There was no promise of happiness. There was no complete redemption. There was a type of hard honesty that, paradoxically, seemed like the only place where she could breathe without pretending. She didn't say, I love you. Neither did he. It would be a lie at that moment. But Maya did what she rarely did. She chose without having total proof. A door, she repeated, with a rule. Adrian nodded. With a rule. Maya took a step forward. This time she touched his hand. A simple, short contact like a signature. It wasn't a movie kiss. It was a gesture that said, I accept that this exists, but in my way. If you break the rule, Maya said, low. I closed the door. Adrian looked at her hand on his as if that were more dangerous than any weapon. I know, he responded, and that's why it works. Maya released his hand and got in the car. When she started the engine, she didn't look in the rearview mirror. Not because she didn't care, but because, for the first time, she didn't want to turn what she felt into surveillance. She slowly left the parking lot, taking with her two incompatible things: the lucidity of someone who knows what he is, and the choice to return anyway, if she ever wanted to. And Adrian stayed there, standing in the cold, knowing he had ceded enough territory to keep the empire standing, and for the first time, ceded a little of himself so someone could stay close without being swallowed. Thank you for watching. Like and share. Until the next story.